Welcome to the deep dive. You know we love to get our hands dirty, and today we're diving deep into Autodesk, or ADSK, as you stock-savvy listeners know it. You guys sent us a ton of stuff on this one, financial reports, earnings calls, analyst opinions, the whole shebang. But before we really get down to the nuts and bolts, can you just give us like a quick overview of what Autodesk actually does?
Sure thing. So Autodesk is like a major player in the world of 3D design engineering and even entertainment software. Their products are used by pretty much everyone, from architects designing these crazy skyscrapers to the geniuses behind those mind-blowing special effects you see in movies. Think like AutoCAD, Revit, Maya Fusion 360. These are like the big names. And we're not talking about some small niche company here. They're global. They've got their fingers in all sorts of industries.
Wow, so their software is a pretty big deal in those fields. All right, well, let's get into the numbers then. Their stock price is hovering around, was it $305 or so? And the 52-week range is somewhere between 195 and 326, if I'm reading this right. And then their market cap is a whopping $65.61 billion. Okay, so I know market cap is supposed to tell us about the company's total value, but can you help me out here? What does all of this actually mean for someone who's thinking about investing in Autodesk?
Well, for starters, it means they're definitely a large cap company. And we're talking established big player, holds a pretty significant chunk of the market share, all that. That 52-week range you mentioned shows us there's been some volatility, which is always something to keep in mind when you're assessing risk. Now, whether or not the current price is a good entry point, well, that depends on a bunch of different factors. Things like how healthy are their financials, really? How have they been performing recently? And what kind of future prospects are we looking at? This report we've got here gives them a wide economic moat rating, which is definitely a good sign.
Okay, wide economic moat. That sounds pretty impressive. But I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely sure what that means. Can you break it down for us?
Imagine like a castle with a massive moat around it. It's all about protection, right? So in the business world, a wide moat basically means a company has some serious competitive advantages, things that are going to help protect their market share and keep those profits rolling in. For Autodesk, a big part of that is what we call network effects.
Network effects. See, I get that when we're talking about something like social media. You know, the more people using it, the more valuable the platform becomes. But how does that work with Autodesk's business model?
Think of it this way. The more architects, engineers, construction teams, all those professionals who work on these huge projects, the more they all use Autodesk software, the more essential it becomes for collaboration and sharing all that data. It's like they create this industry standard that's really tough for competitors to crack. I mean, can you imagine the chaos if the architect's using Revit, but the engineers are using some totally different incompatible software? Having everyone on that same Autodesk platform streamlines the whole project from start to finish.
Oh, I see. So it's like they're building this ecosystem where everyone's connected, and it's super hard to switch to a competitor once you're plugged into their system.
Exactly. And on top of that, there are those high switching costs we talked about. It's not just learning a new program, you're potentially risking all these existing projects and collaborations. Plus, they've got that brand recognition. Autodesk's been a leader in this space for decades. All these factors contribute to their wide moat and help them hold on to that dominant market position.
I see. I see. They built themselves a pretty solid fortress. Now, let's talk about their latest earnings report. It says they saw an 11% increase in revenue year over year. On the surface, that sounds pretty fantastic, but what's the story behind those numbers? What did you pick up from the earnings call transcript?
Yeah, 11% growth is definitely nothing to sneeze at. But digging a little deeper, the earnings call painted kind of a mixed picture. On the positive side, Autodesk really emphasized the strong momentum in their core business and the success of their new transaction model. Apparently, this new model is really driving both billings and revenue. And the transition to those cloud-based subscriptions, that seems to be working out well, too. It's leading to more predictable recurring revenue streams, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, that does sound like a good recipe for long-term success. But you said it was a mixed bag, so what are some of the challenges they're facing?
Well, the thing is, even though this transition to the new model is probably good for them in the long run, it's causing some short-term volatility in their financials.
Yeah.
They're also dealing with external pressures like, the whole macroeconomic situation everyone's talking about. Businesses are tightening their belts, and even with a strong product lineup, that can definitely impact Autodesk's sales.
Right, so even a powerhouse like Autodesk isn't immune to those bigger economic forces. Anything else we should be keeping an eye on?
Actually, there is one more thing. Both the earnings call transcript and some recent news articles mentioned pressure from an activist investor, Starboard Value.
Oh, activist investors, that always makes things interesting. What are they pushing for, and how could that impact Autodesk's future?
Well, Starboard Value has a reputation for really shaking things up. They tend to push companies to make changes that they believe will increase shareholder value. In Autodesk's case, it seems like they're advocating for some cost-cutting measures, and they might even be exploring a sale of the company. So, yeah, that definitely adds a layer of uncertainty to the whole picture.
It sounds like we've uncovered both opportunities and potential roadblocks here. And then on top of that, we've got this whole range of analyst opinions, everything from buy to hold to underperform. How are we supposed to make sense of all these different perspectives?
Well, it's not unusual to see a variety of opinions, especially with a company like Autodesk that's going through these transitions and facing those external pressures we talked about. Some analysts are looking at the current price and saying it's overvalued. They're pointing to the macroeconomic headwinds and the potential disruption from starboard value. But then you've got others who are more optimistic. They're focusing on Autodesk's long-term growth potential, especially with the whole cloud computing and artificial intelligence revolution that's happening.
So it's like a tug of war between those short-term concerns and the long-term potential. It's interesting that we're seeing such contrasting views from these experts. For example, UBS just started covering Autodesk and they slapped a buy rating on it. But then you've got HSBC downgrading them to hold.
Yeah.
What's driving those conflicting opinions?
It really comes down to which factors each analyst is prioritizing. UBS, for example, in their buy rating, they're highlighting Autodesk's dominant position, especially in the architecture, engineering, and construction sector. That's a huge market. They're betting that Autodesk's cloud and AI strategies are going to be major growth drivers, and that's going to lead to a nice upside for the stock. HSBC, on the other hand, they're more focused on the near-term challenges. They downgraded Autodesk to hold because they're worried about earnings growth slowing down, and they think the current valuation might be a bit inflated considering all the uncertainty in the market.
So it's a real clash between short-term concerns and long-term potential. If I'm trying to decide whether or not to invest, how should I approach this?
Honestly, it all boils down to your individual goals, your risk tolerance, and your time horizon. If you're a long-term investor and you're comfortable with a bit of risk, Autodesk's growth potential might be really tempting, even with all the uncertainties we talked about. You might even see this whole period of transition and market volatility as a buying opportunity. But if you're more risk averse or you're looking for those predictable returns in the near term, Autodesk might not be the best fit for you right now.
So it all comes back to those personal investment goals and how much risk you're willing to take on. We've covered a lot of ground here. Autodesk definitely has a lot going for it, but they're also facing some serious challenges. Before we wrap up, is there anything else we should be thinking about?
One aspect we haven't really touched on is the competitive landscape.
Hmm.
Even though Autodesk is a leader, it's important to understand how their rivals are doing. That can give you some valuable context.
That's a really good point. Even the giants have to keep an eye on the competition. This deep dive has given us a really solid understanding of where Autodesk stands, but looking at their competitors would definitely complete the picture.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Analyzing the competition can help you spot those potential threats and opportunities that you might miss if you're just looking at Autodesk in isolation.
So for our listeners out there who are trying to figure out if Autodesk is a good investment for them, what would you say are the key takeaways from all this?
All right, so first and foremost, Autodesk is a dominant force in a growing market. Their software is absolutely essential for a ton of industries, everything from architecture to entertainment. And that wide economic moat we talked about gives them a huge leg up on the competition. But that doesn't mean they're invincible. They're dealing with the whole macroeconomic mess that everyone's worried about. They're in the middle of this transition to a new transaction model, and they've got that activist investor breathing down their necks. All of that could definitely have an impact on their performance, at least in the short term.
So it's like high potential for growth, but also some potential speed bumps along the way.
Exactly. For someone who's in it for the long haul and comfortable with a bit of risk, those speed bumps might not be a deal breaker. They might even see this as a chance to buy into a great company at a bit of a discount. But if you're someone who really values stability and predictable returns, Autodesk might not be the right fit for you right now.
It all comes back to those individual goals and how much risk you're willing to stomach.
Yep.
You've definitely given our listeners a lot to think about. Before we wrap things up, is there one final thought, something that we didn't really get into from all those documents that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
That's a good question. One thing we didn't really touch on is the whole technological landscape and how Autodesk is positioned for the future. Like, how well are they integrating artificial intelligence and machine learning into their software? And how does that compare to what their competitors are up to? Those are some questions worth exploring. Huh.
Oh, that's a great point. Technology is constantly changing everything, right? So understanding how a company is adapting to all of that is crucial if you're trying to figure out their long-term prospects. It sounds like this deep dive has given us a solid foundation, but there's always more to discover.
Always another layer to peel back, another perspective to consider. That's what keeps things interesting.
Well said. A huge thank you to you for sharing all of your insights and helping us navigate the wild world of Autodesk. And to our listener out there, we hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge you need to make an informed decision. But as we've said before, this is just the beginning. Your own research and due diligence are essential.
Couldn't agree more. Informed investors are empowered investors.
So to our listener, keep exploring Autodesk. Dig into those competitors. Research their AI initiatives. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to make those smart investment decisions.
And who knows, you might even uncover something we missed.
That's the beauty of learning. Always more to discover. All right, well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into Autodesk. A huge thank you to you for joining us on this journey. And to our listener, thank you for trusting us to be your guides through this complex landscape.
It's been my pleasure.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, we've got a whole library of fascinating topics just waiting for you right here on this channel. So hit that subscribe button and tap that bell icon to stay up to date. We release new deep dives every single week, exploring everything from the future of technology to the mysteries of the universe.
There's something for everyone.
So until next time, keep those brains curious and remember, knowledge is power.